don't really. And let other people do the feeling. I'll do the touchy, they can do the feeling.
You can fake it.
Yeah, kind of mostly copy it. He's mirroring. And mirroring is supposed to be an indication of everything anyway, isn't it? So, it's back all the time. Oh,
Yo,
how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing? With your
I think
snazzy
I'm doing well.
Rosher shirt.
I think I'm doing well. John Rosher, if you're going to be proper about it. Welcome everybody to another live stream with myself, Gareth Wax, and of course David Cherick, freshly back from Amsterdam, absolutely chilled and relaxed. Ready for the cut and thrust of modern business. Today we're talking about something I don't know a whole lot about, which is empathy. I'm a great at faking it. Not really sure what it is. Don't tend to feel it in the same way. Empathy, compassion, mysteries. But apparently, during a sale or a sales process, we're supposed to demonstrate empathy. It's the right thing to do. Oh, really? Is this really a real bind for you at this moment? Is it you're going to juggle budgets? Have you? Oh, yeah. I know how that feels. It must be. Yeah, all that. Yeah.
You do it so well. You did it really, really well, Gareth. You probably had more practice doing it than people who do actually feel empathy.
Well, yeah, because you see, here's the thing. Empathy or being empathetic is often about wearing a heart on a sleeve. But the problem with doing that is it can be quite uncontrolled. So horror, distrust, misunderstanding, confusion, these are not great things to wear on your sleeve. They tend to scare people away rather than endearing you to them. So not showing any of them or just showing the ones that you want them to see is a better way through. And therefore, a person who has limited access to real empathy chooses to fake the ones that are relevant to the time.
So in sales, people are usually taught to try and figure out what people's problems are and goals, of course, and try and get them as personal as possible. What does it mean to you? What's the problem with that? How does it affect you? What are your drivers?
What are your drivers behind this? And and how does it affect you? How does it affect you personally? And how does it make you feel? And all that.
And to get them to wallow in those problems, really to sort of experience and talk about the problems even more. And it affects your personal life as well. And
it must be getting in the way of you having that holiday, I guess. And your wife, she was looking forward to that holiday too, I guess. Is that true? Yeah.
So we're taught to do all of that. I mean, I've always found that kind of like a bit manipulative when we're taught to use those things.
It's not a bit manipulative. It is all of the manipulative. It is manipulative.
It is manipulative. So I've always shied away from it. So I've always, although I do personally experience feelings of empathy, because I'm not autistic. And just as a reminder to people who haven't watched many of these episodes, Gareth here is autistic.
That's me. I may seem all bright and breezy, but I used to be a whole maze of confusion until I decided that rather than constantly asking myself, what the hell does that face mean? What's that expression mean? Is there a double meaning behind it? Have I misunderstood? I just ignore the whole lot now. I guess it's because I've gotten to a certain age. So I ignore the whole lot and I just live the world as I perceive it.
That's right. But you do, and you told me before that you do mimic behaviors or signs that will demonstrate the usual expected reactions that you would hear.
Well, it's a little bit of easy reading for most people. If you can go to your local library and look up a book by a gentleman called Desmond Morris, it's called Man Watching. There's a more wordy version called The Naked Ape, but the concept is all about body language, body mirroring, understanding that for instance, reflecting what somebody else is doing can often make them feel more secure. So I've taken that to heart, and if I see someone and I'm trying to persuade them of a concept or an idea, and if perhaps I used to do this far more often than I do now. I'm far less disingenuous than I used to be. But when I was a salesperson, I'd be sitting with them and they'd be pondering it. I'd be there mimicking them and making sure that my leg was crossed the exact mirrors of the way their legs were crossed and all that sort of stuff. I don't bother so much now. In fact, I don't bother at all now. But the point about it was, back then it did help me close sales, or I perceived that it did.
Yeah, and look, back in the day, we were all taught, or anybody that went to a decent worked for a decent company or went to a decent sales school was taught an element or even a lot of NLP, neuro linguistic programming, in order to do this.
Sure.
The matching and mirroring, but I mean, people are wise to it now.
They are and they aren't. If you are too obvious,
I mean, you can sense it. You can sense it. You can sense when someone's doing it, even if you don't know exactly what they are mimicking or what they are mirroring.
Well, I don't tend to do it anymore, so I've got nothing to report back on. But I don't know. I sense it when people are doing artificial empathy.
Mm.
So I recognise all the things I used to do.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, if they're doing that thing, you'll recognise this. You're talking, and you know they want to butt in, and you get they're going, yeah, yeah, nod, and they're looking at you, and so what I do is I put a strategic pause in, and if you can see them jump in, grab that pause. Now's my turn. Yeah, you can see that they're just trying to jig you along to the point where you run out of steam, and they can say their point, and often they'll go something like, "Absolutely, I'm talking about something completely different."
Yeah. But when I say people
I don't find that irritating. I used to find that irritating. I don't anymore. I just find that amusing.
So, but people are wise to all of these sorts of tricks. I think that buyers have become increasingly skeptical and suspicious and mistrustful of people selling them.
The level of cynicism nationally, dare I say,
it when you're on a call center call, as I had to do when my flight was cancelled. Thank you, EasyJet. That when you have to speak to somebody on the phone and they've been taught to follow a script, and I like scripts, but when they reply saying, "Oh yes, sir, that sounds really frustrating, sir. I can help you with that."
Also, if they ask you about how was your day today and things like that, and it's completely artificial, and you've rung up to do something completely transactional.
Yeah, I've had car sales people do that. I've had one in particular that the first thing he asked me was about what football club I support. How is that even relevant? Please, can we just...
That's a question for later down the line. That's a question for once we've become buddy, chummy. Then yeah, maybe that's appropriate then. But until then, it's just not right.
But it's important to try and find points of connection, and it's important to be able to acknowledge what people say and to try and have the experience of their feelings too. Isn't it?
I don't know.
Putting yourself in other people's shoes.
That's a good one. I can fit in the shoes. Doesn't mean I can walk in them. Look, here's the thing. If you can perceive that someone's on schmilkers, they're on the verge of a decision, but they feel like they're being held back by something, the natural tendency for any salesperson is trying to remove obstacles to that path, right? And so you want to fish around to find out what's holding them back. So I can see that this is going well. We're on the verge of a deal. We've understood what each other's intention is, and so, but I can see that something's holding you back.
So, but when we pick up those signals, when we get those signals that somebody is holding back, and they might express it verbally, "Oh, I'm not ready to go ahead with this," But you know, quite often we will detect it in their body language. Some people find it easier or harder to detect that in body language.
That's true. That's true.
But rather than just faking empathy and pretending that you know how they're feeling, there are other things.
I know how much pressure there must be on you at this time to really get this done. What with the deadline approaching, and you know, potentially budgets being revised in less than a week's time. Yeah. I can't help but imagine the pressure on your shoulder right now. No, I can't do any of that. And
no, I don't think that's a good thing to do.
And I hear people doing it all the time. Let me tell you a story. There was a client of mine called Tony Pincham, who's a three-dimensional photographer, really, really quite talented. They went to buy a new car salesman. He's on the phone to him every other day. You know, just checking, make sure that you're really happy with all these specs. And we've built those extra things, making him feel really cozy and loved and warm and fuzzy. Day after the car was delivered, he phones up because there's not anything wrong, but really to thank them. Who are you? It's Tony. You were speaking to me yesterday. Was I? Oh, yeah. Oh, how are you all right? That's what I mean. It's like they're faking it all the way through. And when the client finally cottons on, and as you say, with raised levels of cynicism and distrust that there is right now, especially with the government being what it is, and especially with us not being connected to our largest trading partner, etc., with all that going on, it just makes you feel distrustful anyway at the base level, doesn't it?
Yeah. So people are pretty cynical, and getting more so. I mean, in my career, they've always been fairly cynical, and
fairly cynical, but there used to be what I would refer to like the breaking point, where at which point they'd start trusting you, and I'd see that as you create moments of belief by kind of saying, I'm going to do a thing by a certain time, and you do that thing by that certain time, and nobody acknowledges it necessarily, but you know, and it's ticked off in their mind. It's another thing where Gareth did what he said he was going to do, and get to a point where you say, well, I think you should do this. And they go, yeah, well, since you said it, let's do it. And you know you've hit it at that point. Now, that used to be a lot easier to do.
But that's not faking it, is it? That's a
real that's real. But what I'm saying is that the amount of belief that you had to get them to engender in you used to be relatively little. 4 or 5 times on achieving goals in the way you said you were going to, or perhaps even exceeding them, and they would be with you. Now you could do it 20 times, and they still think you're going to shaft them, and so the urge to fake the empathy becomes ever more so, because you want them to feel cozy and warm, so they get past that natural distrust, and they got going, Gareth, tell me what I should do next.
So what happens on the empathy side if you decide to, well, do you know what, I'm just going to abandon trying to show empathy because, you know, people don't trust it anyway. I'm faking it and I don't want to carry on doing that. So I'm just not going to do it.
Well, I do that. Do you know, the first things I do in any potential business transaction, I do my speech, and my speech goes something like this. I'm autistic. I don't understand social values and social cues. I don't understand facial expressions, and I tend to find it conflicts with body language, which I'm somewhat of a study of. So therefore, I've taken an executive decision to ignore the whole bloody lot. I'm going to be blunt. I'm going to be direct. You won't like it at some point, and I'm asking you to stop for a moment before you recoil and say, yeah, Gareth's just being straight with me and not emotionally trying to cue me.
So how do people react to that first speech? I mean, I've heard it first time we spoke, and we've talked about it before.
I get a mix of reactions. 70% of them love it. I think they find it a relief. 30% go, oh, and 10% go, well, I can't talk to you, goodbye. And I have to be prepared for that.
So I have a little speech as well. I mean, I'm not for everybody, and none of us are for everybody. But I'm also known for being particularly direct, especially on my client engagements. And because there's limited time, they pay quite a lot of money for me, and I just don't want to hold back. Yeah, so I just do it. Also, I live, I have sort of a bit of a hardcore value system as well. So
yeah, and also the street cred. Let's not forget that.
exactly. But so I prepare people for that, and most people, when I tell them that I am particularly direct, they will respond by saying, "Well, I appreciate that. I want you to be direct," and they
lie. A lot of people that say I want them to be direct are not prepared for you to say, right, well, that's ugly, that's wrong. You need to. This is completely inappropriate.
Exactly.
And why are you doing this?
Exactly. So, and I think that the same holds true for showing empathy. I think if I was to be able to say to somebody, listen, I'm not going to spend too much time, stroking you and giving you lots of empathy and stuff like that, because either I don't have the ability, like you, or I don't have the time, maybe like me.
Yeah, it's just time is fleeting. So,
and they might well say, well, as 70% of your clients do, that's fine by me, that's cool, I'm happy with that, I'd rather not waste any time on that. But then when it comes to it, they might need it.
Well,
they might need
it. Yeah, they might mean it, but it's I often do half an hour discovery sessions. We both do, which I don't charge for. And in that time, I spend most of it pulling apart their LinkedIn profile and saying, you're missing a trick here. You could re-emphasize there. By not doing this, potentially you're going to lose interest, etc., etc., etc. And
I do that with their pipelines.
Well, exactly. It's parallel. And you'll be going, this is fanciful.
That's not a deal.
That's not real. It's not real. That's pretend. This is just to boost your own ego.
So what you're showing me here is you've got nothing in your pipeline, really.
Exactly. And I don't know whether you ever get this reaction, but I get this reaction usually about 10 minutes in, from the people, that 10%. They go, I can't deal with this. I'm sorry. It's not for me. Bye-bye. Click. And they go on. And to me, when that first used to happen, I used to think, how dare they? I booked this time, and now I think they've saved me a lot of effort further down the line, because I've taken on a couple of clients that I wouldn't say bullied, but I'd persuaded that this was the right way, and they couldn't cope with that level of directness.
Yeah, so I don't get them saying that to me. I get it. It presents in a different way. They say to me, they say, "Oh, thanks very, very much. That was really, really useful. Ciao. Bye now.
Bye. Never speak to you again."
Well, actually, as you saying that, some of them have come back. Some have come back, and sometimes, there was one that came back. It must have been 2 years later.
Wow.
And there's actually one that has just come back. This does happen quite regularly, and this must be 3 months later. I think this is 3 months later. They've messaged me to say, actually, can we strike up a conversation again?
Wow. And you said to them, what changed?
Well, I know what changed.
You don't want them to tell you. I'd want them to tell me.
What has changed is that nothing has changed in that 2 years or 3 month period for them. And then they have sort of come to terms with the reality of their situation.
Right.
That's probably what has changed. But it's cool. I have my particular style of communication. You have yours. They have theirs.
Yeah, of course.
And, we don't have to click with everybody. But if we can find a way to click, and if we do actually have the genuine feeling of empathy, then I think it's good to show it. If we don't have that feeling, then we don't need to show empathy. Instead, I think we can just at least acknowledge their feelings. We can at least acknowledge what they have told us, which I think that people fail to do in their rush. Salespeople, in their rush to fake or show empathy, forget something that's even more important, which is listening.
Oh, that one. Well, yeah. Listening is very important, but the thing is, I invite people, and I don't know if I invite people to listen without then making a plan of what they're going to say next. They almost want to listen. After the person's finished talking, turn it over their head and then formulate a response. Otherwise, you can see them. They're sitting there on the edge of their seat,
wanting to say something.
Just say that thing to you, and it's like, you're not giving the right thing there.
You've been choking your way through this call.
Yeah, it's all right. I got a bit of spittle down the wrong hole earlier.
Great. That's just exactly what we wanted to hear this time on LinkedIn.
Big lumps of it down there. No.
Great. I empathise, man. I've had that too.
Yeah, it's horrible. All right, so guys, I hope you found that useful. You're not alone.
Try to do my little sum up.
Yeah, go on, do a little summary.
So I think that in the big drive to show empathy, you can forget all of that these days. You don't have to show empathy. Certainly don't fake it. If you feel it, then express it. But more importantly than that, listen to what they're saying. And
but I still think if you feel, try and remain some level of poker face. Try not to do the opposite, which is when they say something, show revulsion or concern or distrust. Those are the things that will turn off a deal before it's even got off the ground.
I think that's a point of debate, but I do acknowledge that you feel that way, Gareth.
Well, thank you.
But the other thing that
he acknowledges I feel that way. I don't need your acknowledgement. I feel that way anyway.
Cool. I hear you.
The thing is, right, I've seen this happen before where I was actually training someone on how to close a deal, what things to listen for and what things to take note of, and where he thought the deal was going to be worth, I can't remember, it was say 20,000 and it turned out to be only 1,000, and it was halfway through a conversation face to face with the client, and the client was all gung-ho wanting to go forward, and they said, so when you invoice for the 1,000, and he's gone, 1,000? 1,000? That, and like the client got wind of it. It's like, what do you mean? Was that not enough for you? What's going on? It's like, and before you knew it, even this little baby deal had sunk. And what was important to him was to understand the pipeline of deals that were behind it all suddenly sunk as well. And he could have just chaperoned that through and just, what he didn't realize was 20,000 was all the deals that were in the pipeline with this client, and the 1,000.
So he chucked it all away just because of his response to showing his disappointment.
Well, showing his disappointment in a kind of childish knee-jerk kind of way, rather than trying to work out what it meant, do a little bit of. So this is the first part, is it, of the entire deal, which is what I would have said. And they would have said, yeah, of course, but we need you to prove yourself on the first bit.
Yeah. This is a case of don't be a baby.
Yeah.
Don't be a baby. If you've got, these pent up babyish feelings, get a grip of your feelings. Yeah.
Well, not just in that moment, not in general. You can go to the corner and cry your eyes out if you want. But the point is, in front of the client, if he says something that seems to feel like it's wrong-footing the whole thing, don't knee-jerk response. Gather information, formulate, respond.
Cool. Otherwise, and just finally on that point that you mentioned there about the gaining trust, which you mentioned also earlier on in the conversation. You can build up trust by demonstrating you're delivering on the small items as you go through.
Absolutely. Those are great moments of belief. This is a £1,000 worth block of electronics, which was part of a bunch of core switches and all the rest of it. And he perceived that the whole deal was that it was going to be delivered then, and it was going to go in that month's thing. And instead it was just going to be the first one, which was 1,000, which of course was tiny compared to it. And if he just said, that's great, we're going to make you absolutely love us on this deal, I just want to secure up that the rest of it will follow, and they said, which they would have done, of course, then we'd have been singing pretty, and in a month's time he'd have had the other £19,000 rest of the deal, and everyone, including me, would have been happy. As it was, you screwed the pooch, and he could have easily have sorted it out.
And I've made a note just there for us to do a session on this about how salespeople can get overexcited about the scale of a deal.
And it's the one thing that I live and die by, which is setting personal expectations.
Yeah, cool. All right, Gareth.
Take care, everybody. Stay fruity. Always know where your towel is, and just remember, there's always a deal on the other side of the rainbow.